Oh, and before I proceed with image asset creation, and just make a comment about these videos. With the exception of the intro, all these videos are unscripted, and occasionally I have to stop and maybe delete a recording or go back and piece together. So you're going to see jumps. Sometimes a window will move, or sometimes you'll see a different tab open. But usually the content, the way it progresses, is the same. So just want to put that out there and apologize if it's a little disruptive. Sometimes there are just things you don't want to record. For instance, the last video I recorded, there was a crash in the engine after I created the image asset. And this is important, worth pointing out. The image asset was structured correctly. The image looked right on the OS, and there were no script errors, yet the engine was crashing. And at that point, when I know there's nothing wrong with the engine, there's nothing wrong with my asset, and the image looks fine, that's when I have to go and check out the image format. And I was actually loading the background image, background JPEG, and it actually had been corrupted by my editing tool. I was using GIMP, and for some reason it had messed up the format, and the engine couldn't handle it. As soon as I replaced it with a clean image, or something I didn't use GIMP with, it worked just fine. So I had to stop and re-record the video. So just thought I'd bring that up. Sometimes when you get a crash, you might want to post in our forum saying, here's my image asset, here's what it looks like, and I'm still getting a crash. And usually one of the first things you'll do is say there's a chance the image is corrupted. So just keep that in mind. But with all that being said, I'm going to go ahead and create an image asset for my background. Again, using AppCode's template, I have a T2D TAML. Now that's a little misleading. This is not a TAML format. Again, TAML is a persistent system, but I labeled this template with TAML so I remember that, okay, I'm creating an XML file that's going to be parsed by Torch2D's TAML. Anyway, so I'm going to call this background image.asset.taml. And at this point, it should be noted, I could call this XML if I wanted to. I would just have to go back to my module and add to the declared assets that it should be looking for in asset.xml. I'm just using TAML to help me to make it stick out that this is an XML file going into Torch2D. That way I don't get any other XML files loading in by accident, because I like to set my program's association. Anyway, with my template I have to specify what the root element is. In this case I'm making an image asset. And for the schema location, I believe, again, this is relative to where I put the schema file. So I dumped it in the root of my directory. So I believe if I count up, it's up 1, 2, 3, 4. And the great thing about a schema is, and especially AppCode, it'll tell me if the schema is not present if I use the wrong directory. But if I just create this, immediately, it's letting me know that there are no children, but more importantly, this XSD file, my schema, is invalid. So either I went too many directories above or not enough. So let me reduce this down to 3. No. Alright, so it's 5 directories, and this is perfectly valid. Now with my template, it automatically drops in these 2 lines. And this is important because this tells my editor, in this case AppCode, what kind of format this is. What's the schema instance or setting, and this points to my schema location. Now I could just as easily just create this without that information, and in fact let's just start with that real quick. I'm just going to create an image asset, and because I've done this before, I have an idea, like I know what is important. I want to create a single image with no cells, but I know every asset has to have an asset name. So I'm going to call this background image. And then I'm going to also point to the image file, background.png. I actually changed that in the last recording that I was doing. And I just need to fix this so it looks like so it has a proper XML formatting. And there we go. That's the simplest way to create an image asset. I just put the image type, and then inside of it, the elements, I have an asset name, an image file, and that should be enough to get it going. But I'm actually going to back out or undo my changes so that I can get my schema information. Now this is, again, these are sub-elements, so in AppCode if I hit Control Space, There we go. I get all my possible properties for this. As I showed before, look at that. Asset name. That's perfect. That's exactly what I want. And then I could start typing and get information. Like if I start typing image, there we go. Right to my image file, autocomplete, thus speeding things up dramatically for me. And the white space isn't such a problem, but I like to at least make it look a little clean in case I have to hand this off to an artist. And to keep it simple, I don't need the ending tag image asset. I can just close it off right here. And this is a completely valid image asset format. And AppCode will look at the schema and tell me if I've messed anything up. And this is also really nice. I misspelled background, and I'm getting a little warning from here that it's not spelled correctly. There we go. And everything looks green. No errors, no warnings, no nothing at all. So my module definition is going to be an XML format, and instead of creating it through the operating system or using TextEdit or whatever, I have a template set up in AppCode. It can just makes my life easier. So I'm going to select the version 1 folder, and then I'm going to say create a T2D module file for me. And it's just going to have a file name of module. I'm going to point to my schema that I generated earlier, and that is a relative path, and I know it's up. See, that would go up 3 directories, but I believe it's actually 4. And the module is my assets, version 1. This is just sample assets. I'm not going to have any dependencies. My type is going to be toy, so I can work with this inside its sandbox. And I will be creating a main.cs to be used with this module, and it will be looking for create and destroy functions. And I can name those whatever I want. But essentially, once I hit OK, if all went well, there it is. There's my module definition. But it appears something has gone wrong, and usually one of the first signs of this is my schema is not in the right place. So either I went too far or didn't go far enough. So let's see. Nope, it's not 5. Oh, there we go. There's only 3 directories up. And now it's all good. You notice no red lines. AppCode has a decent XML editor. Visual Studio will kind of give you the same feedback. It's like, hey, you want a schema? I can't find it. Let me tell you about that. And this dependencies is kind of, don't really need that right now. So I'm going to get rid of that. And I know that there's a dynamic field for that the sandbox uses. So it's actually a category. Notice as I'm typing, I'm getting some red lines saying, this is not working out too well. I'm going to have to close this off. And what if I go to type anything? Maybe S. I suddenly get some pop-ups. I get a superclass, I get a scope set, I get can save dynamic fields. What if I do something else? What if I do something I know this needs? Maybe say this is without any additional key presses, or without any typing. What I did is I did Control Space, and I said, give me all of my options. What all can I do? And this gives me a list of all the potential elements that I can add to this. Now, I'll be honest, the XML editor for Visual Studio is actually a little bit more robust, and it's a little bit more reliable, I guess you could say. But AppCode gets the job done for sure. Ooh, I'm actually going to have a... Oh, no, I still have to close that off. What I want is declared assets. And inside of my declared assets, I need to have, let's see if I get some suggestions. Yep, I do. I want to know my path. And the path is just going to be assets. If you remember, I created that folder earlier. And I need to know the extension of things that I'm looking for. So everything's going to be .asset.taml as I create them. And finally, I do want to go recursive searching. Now here's something cool. It's saying that this XML tag has an empty body. Now, let's see, recurse is supposed to be a true or false, but what if I put in Mitch? Ooh, does not like Mitch, and why doesn't it? The value of Mitch of attributes recurse on element declared assets is not valid with respect to its type Boolean. In other words, this is telling me you need to be a value of Boolean, so this text of Mitch is all wrong. If I hit Control Space, there's my answer. Yes, recurse. Now, for anyone who's been developing XML files, asset definitions, or whatever for Torque2D in the past, they didn't get any of these auto-completion because they didn't have a schema. So you can imagine they're probably going to be very happy, or you should be pretty thankful you have this now. This gives you a great chance to rapidly create XML files or object definitions and get instant validation and also get suggestions. Maybe you don't know everything. Maybe you didn't know the name of declared asset. And that's what I like about this using a good XML editor like AppCode or Visual Studio with a schema, is this is going to allow me to quickly create things. Alright, so now I have my module definition. If I were to locate that, there's module.taml. In fact, let me open up with the text editor. If you don't have AppCode, you can't afford it, or using something else, maybe you'll use text editor. There it is in raw text with no real schema helping. So forget that. I'm not going to worry about that. Alright, now I have my module definition, and it's saying this is what I am, and then I'm going to have assets in this folder path, and I'll be looking for, mistake. There we go. That's what I want to do. So anything that I put inside of these, anything below assets, or assets and animations, or assets and images, if it has the extension of .asset.taml, then the asset manager, the database, will say, I loaded this module, I scanned this directory, I found these files with this extension, these must be assets, let's load them in as declared assets. Let's use those for a reference later. So that's a good start. Honestly, I think if I were to just try and run Torque2D right now, it will probably complain about some missing things. Let's see. I'm going to actually try and find my assets module. There it is. If I click it, nothing so far. That's to be expected, but it could not load the module because it's missing a main.cs. Oh, let's fix that real quick. I'm going to add actually let me just use my keyboard shortcut, a T2D module script. Again, this is a template I've made for my own purposes, but it's kind of handy. The file name is main.cs, and the name of the, module is myAssets. If I click OK, look at that. I've got my nice little MIT header. I've got myAssets create, myAssets destroy, and if you are an AppCode user and you want to get your hands on these templates, just leave a message on the video or pop on the Garage Games forums and say, hey, hand it off to me. But you could have written this all, I could have done this all by hand via text editor or through, say, Xcode's text editor, but this just got me along my way. The point of this video is not to teach scripting. We want to create assets. So on that note, let me get some assets real quick. I had stored some earlier. There we go. These are the tutorial assets I'll be using. I actually grabbed these from an old version of iTorque2D, which is a legacy engine. I've got this nice little background. I've got some sprite sheets for Soldier, and I've got some music and even an image that we're going to use for particles. So I'm going to start by grabbing all the images, and I'm going to load those into my module. And you can kind of see now why I've been doing the things I've been doing. I wouldn't say anal, but I'm very strict about how I put things together. And this is my audio files, so that's going to go inside of here, right inside of audio. And if I go back to that, got all my images, got my audio. Now notice there's no animations because I'm going to create those as assets, and there's no particles because basically the same thing. I'm going to create a particle asset, and they really only rely on what I create in images, and then I'll have a single audio asset which will rely on this file. So now I got my raw files. Make sure I'm still in the right directory for my main folder browser. And now I'm going to go back into app code, and I think I'll start with essentially going through the most used assets and then increase in difficulty. So I'll probably start with creating all of my image assets first, then my animations, then my audio, and then I'll save particles for last since it's kind of a complex asset type and you don't have a lot of visualization and kind of have to do this using your own mind and charts. So anyway, yeah, let's get going and creating some images.